On the late evening of August 23, 2001, the boarding gates at Toronto Pearson International Airport were crowded. Air Transat Flight 236, a heavy commercial jet, was preparing for a routine overnight route. Aboard the plane were 306 people. The passenger list was largely made up of Canadian families and couples of Portuguese descent, settling in for a long trip to Lisbon for their summer vacations. A modern red-eye flight is designed to be a deeply comforting sensory environment. After takeoff, the cabin lights were dimmed. Passengers finished their dinners, watched movies, and children fell asleep to the constant, reassuring hum of the jet engines outside their windows. That tight cocoon of warmth and quiet creates a powerful illusion of safety. Inside the cabin, everything feels entirely normal, completely masking the reality that 306 people are suspended 39,000 feet in the air above the dark, freezing waters of the Atlantic Ocean. The origin of this disaster actually began 9 days earlier on the ground. During a rushed weekend maintenance job, mechanics installed a replacement engine using older, mismatched parts. This resulted in a fuel tube and a hydraulic tube being mounted dangerously close together inside the right engine. Once the plane was in the air, the normal vibrations of the flight caused these incompatible metal tubes to rub against each other. Hours of continuous grinding slowly carved a crack into the fuel line. High above the Atlantic, that crack burst, spraying 13 metric tons of aviation fuel per hour straight into the ocean. Inside the cockpit, the pilots noticed irregular fuel readings, but they misdiagnosed the problem. Believing it was a simple imbalance between the wing tanks, they opened a crossfeed valve, a system meant to pump fuel from one side of the plane to the other. By doing this, they were actively draining their good fuel from the left wing directly into the leak on the right. Because the aircraft lacked an automated warning system specifically designed to detect massive fuel leaks, no alarms sounded in the cockpit to alert the crew to what was actually happening outside. While the passengers slept peacefully, expecting to wake up to breakfast over Europe, the pilots were unknowingly accelerating a timeline that guaranteed their plane would soon fall from the sky. At 6:13 a.m., the illusion finally breaks. The right engine starves of fuel and completely shuts down. The physical vibration of the plane shifts instantly, forcing the crew to begin a descent over the open ocean. Exactly 13 minutes later, the left engine dies. Without thrust from either engine, the 200-ton commercial jet is immediately stripped of its ability to fly. It is now nothing more than a massive, heavy glider falling through the atmosphere. The mechanical failure triggers an immediate, terrifying visual shock inside the cabin. As the engines spool down, the main electrical generators shut off. Every light in the cabin dies instantly, plunging all 306 passengers into total darkness. In an instant, the high-tech marvel of modern aviation was gone. The passengers were suddenly wide awake, trapped in the dark, and completely powerless over the absolute middle of the Atlantic. The darkness was accompanied by a severe auditory horror. The comforting background hum of the engines was entirely gone, replaced by the rush of wind against the fuselage and a silence so deep and unnatural that passengers reported their ears began to ring. Panic rapidly spread through the pitch-black cabin. 18-year-old student Vasco dos Santos sat staring into the dark, his mind involuntarily flashing back to the horrific, fiery plane crashes he had only ever seen in movies. Chaos erupted when the captain officially announced they were preparing for an emergency water landing. Flight attendants scrambled to distribute life jackets, but language barriers prevented many of the Portuguese passengers from understanding the crucial, high-stakes instructions on how to strap them on. Faced with the deadly statistics of a nighttime water ditching, passengers reacted in drastically different ways. Margaret Mackin recalled a documentary she had seen about a water crash and quietly accepted her impending death. Beside her, her husband pragmatically refused to give up, insisting they keep their shoes on so they could swim to shore. For 19 minutes, the passengers existed in a vacuum of information, plummeting toward the ocean with nothing to do but listen to the wind and wait for the impact. The pilots had exactly one desperate option left: aiming their massive glider at Lajes Field, a remote military airbase located on an island in the Azores. Maneuvering a heavy commercial jet onto a runway without engine thrust carries extreme risk. Because the engines were dead, the pilots had no reverse thrusters, the critical mechanism that redirects exhaust forward to act as a massive brake during landing. The touchdown was immediate and brutal. Without reverse thrusters, the pilots stood on the brakes, causing the tires to disintegrate and the wheels to grind directly into their metal bearings. The friction ignited bright orange sparks that showered the tarmac as the plane skidded down the runway. Passengers were violently thrown forward in their seats as the plane shuddered and screamed against the runway. They had traded the quiet, freezing terror of the open sky for a brutal, fiery fight with friction on the ground. When the torn metal finally ground to a halt, spontaneous applause broke out in the cabin. Within 2 minutes, all 306 people evacuated safely down the emergency slides, completing the longest powerless glide in the history of commercial aviation. The man flying the plane, Captain Robert Piché, was immediately hailed as a hero for his incredible handling of the aircraft. But the media soon uncovered a complex past. Years prior, Piché had served time in prison as a convicted drug smuggler. Surviving the descent came with a hidden, lasting cost. The passengers eventually filed a $30 million class action lawsuit against the airline, citing the severe, permanent physical and psychological trauma inflicted by those 19 minutes in the dark. While all 306 people survived the night, the experience left deep psychological scars. The resulting $30 million lawsuit detailed passengers who became physically ill and suffered from lifelong trauma, proving that for those on Flight 236, the hum of an airplane engine would never sound routine again.